and then moving on to the oil and gas project. That was I'll let you say it because I'm mixing up my notes here.
It's HPD. HPD. So that was, we transported a few different cargo modules, but one of them, I think probably the largest one, was a crystallizer vessel. So we transported that from Underhook at the Port of Vancouver to a barge location, and then we moved it by water up the Columbia River to a landing location in Lewiston, Idaho.
Good morning and welcome to another remote episode of the Crownsmen Show. During this very difficult time of COVID-19, we continue to keep people connected, informed, and encouraged. This is episode 41, and today we are joined by Cassidy vander. She is Manager of Communications and Marketing of Nickel Brothers. And today she joins us to discuss the details of major residential and industrial structural moving, heavy lifting, and transportation projects. This includes amazing projects in mining, oil and gas, and manufacturing. We will also be discussing the culture that Nickel Brothers has developed over generations of family ownership and how Cassidy moved from a contractor to a full-time member of their team. Now, before you continue to watch, can you guess how many buildings Nickel Bros lifts or moves every year? Well, I'll let you think about that. And today we are also sponsored by PowerZone. When you need a specialized team of world-class engineers for your oil and gas pipelines, dewatering, or any fluid handling needs, you want to visit PowerZone Equipment. In addition to their inventory of rebuilt pumps, motors, engines, they also have an amazing team to design and engineer your systems, no matter the challenge and no matter the location. Get in the zone with PowerZone. You can visit them at powerzone.com. We are also sponsored by Whipware. Whipware's photo analysis software systems help industries from mining, quarries, aggregate, forestry, agriculture, coal, and explosives remove the need to use manual sieving techniques. Their technologies have saved clients millions in energy costs, maintenance costs, process optimization, quality control, lost time injuries, equipment downtime, and quantitative decisions. And you can find out more at whipware.com. Today, we also have a featured sponsor. This is a new kind of sponsors that we've added to the Crownsmen Show. And today, our featured sponsor is Lamson Crane. And you will get to see a little clip about them now.
So the LTL 3000 is a 3,000-ton machine. This is a picture of it at our test facility in Pasco, Washington. It was built specifically for Hitachi for their program over in Japan. Obviously, when Fukushima happened with the earthquake and the tsunami, that put things on hold over there. So they own the crane. We keep it here at our laydown facility in Pasco in our test yard. We exercise it for them on a regular basis, quarterly and annually.
To find out more, please head over to lampsoncrane.com. Again, that's lampsoncrane.com, or you can email them at info@lampsoncrane. Thank you so much for supporting the show. Please make sure to subscribe after every episode. I will also be letting you know of other ways you can support the Crownsmen Show at the end of every episode. And now to get started on episode 41 with Jared and Cassidy. Welcome to the Voice of Industry.
Thank you, Cassidy, for coming on. It's a bit of a hectic time, so we do appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited. I think it's cool how we're all kind of adapting to make things work remotely. So
yeah, are you working from home full time now, or is it sort of back and forth in the midst of this?
No, I've been working from home full time for, I think today's my 14th day actually. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So we have one person in the office at this point, so they're self-isolating, but in the office. So
were you quarantined then for coming back from? Did you go down to what was the Con Expo? Did your team, Nickel Brothers go down there?
No, we didn't, and we ended up being a little bit glad that we didn't end up down there. No, it was just kind of one of those things where it was starting to become a bigger issue, and I can work from home fairly easily. So right. I was asked to work from home a little bit earlier than everyone else.
It's good. I think companies actually, a lot of companies took a really good initiative to just kind of get out ahead of it. Because it was kind of one of these things. I actually feel bad almost for those of us who kind of went out ahead of it, because now we're going to end up being closed up longer than everybody else. If people that are hanging on too long, and then it's going to extend the whole thing out much further. Kind of just wish everybody had just stopped at once, hey?
I was having a discussion about that a couple days ago. Yeah, like, because some people have shut down, and as everyone else shuts down, they're just going to have to stay that way for you know, the next few months until everyone's done it for long enough. Yeah, it's a little bit, some consistency would be nice, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's trying, you know, and it's just one of those things. Have you seen it now already with you working from home more and that sort of thing? Is there anything that you think is going to last? I asked the gentleman on the last episode the same question. Have you seen anything that you've adapted that may stay the same?
I think some members of our team have gotten more comfortable using like instant messaging platforms like Slack, and using the video calls, which is great because like when you have clients that are kind of all over the place, video calls are a great way to be able to meet with them without having to fly so much. So I could see those things lasting past kind of the situation that we're currently in. But the thing that I'm curious about is how many companies, now that they're set up remotely, are going to stay that way and just get rid of their offices. Like, I'm curious to see how many of them are like, oh, this works and it's less overhead, let's keep it.
Or scale them back to, I think, I would see that it's going to happen. I mean, there was companies, like I know TELUS has a lot of employees that work remotely already, and like some of the bigger companies were already doing it, because obviously for them to house all those employees in those offices is a huge expense. So I do think we'll probably see smaller companies adapting more, you know, rotating people through office, even for an office of 9 or 10 people, so you can only have an office for 5, but actually facilitates 10.
Yeah, well, and especially now that they've kind of invested in the infrastructure to be able to do it. Yes. It almost seems silly for some companies, depending on the amount they've invested, to go back completely, right?
Yeah, it's a big shift. And to get in, so Nickel Brothers, I mean, they've been around a long time. I think I saw like 1956 or something.
Yes, we started in 1956. It was two brothers, which were Henry and what was his brother's name? Oh my goodness.
I've got it here. I'll try to beat you to it.
Thank you.
Richard.
Richard. Yes. You should cut that.
We do not. Believe me, I've had way worse gaffes than that on this show, and we don't cut it.
Oh dear.
No, when you go on camera, it's a different thing. Believe me, you're not the only one. So they started back in 1956.
Yeah, and it actually, I believe it was Henry who was working for a house moving company in Manitoba, and they wanted to open a British Columbia branch, so they sent him out here to start it. And after a while, he ended up just buying out the BC branch and started Nickel Brothers with his brother. And that was kind of how we got started.
And it's this, I saw in your notes, I mean, it's a multi-generation. Is it still the same family that owns it?
It's still the same family. Yeah, our CEO is a second generation Nickel. And our ops managers are third generation Nickels, and we have a couple of fourth generation Nickels now working in the shop. One of them's like a heavy duty mechanic, and so it's kind of cool. They've all kind of filtered in different positions and different ways.
Wow. How is that to see kind of that family grow and just keep coming in, you know, because so many generations?
It's one thing that I really like about it is they really do kind of it. There's only a few members of the company that are family members still, just because we've had so much growth, right? There are a lot of kind of like outside hires now, but they really do still kind of treat everyone like family. Like, we very much have a culture of taking care of each other, and it's different to work in than a lot of other places I've worked, where it's a little bit more corporate and kind of just everyone does what they're supposed to be doing. Whereas with the family business, you're kind of helping each other out wherever you can. Everyone kind of has different skill sets so that they can jump in as needed. And the work ethic is really there because your leadership team is so invested because it's their name, right? It's their name on the company. It's their name on everything they do. And that ends up being really contagious. So there's a really heightened sense of accountability and kind of pride in what we do and how we treat our clients and the results that we produce.
Wow.
Yeah, it's something interesting actually. I've noticed on the show how many companies have multi-generations that have been on the show because statistically a lot of companies actually don't make it to the second and third generations, and but it seems like maybe it's an industrial in the industrial side thing or something because so many of our companies that have been guests have been 3-4 generations, and I noticed that there's two. I want to get into a little more of the side of what Nickel Brothers offers because there is a residential side and there's the industrial side. But did it start out as residential, as a residential heavy lifting and moving service?
It did, yeah. I actually think it's kind of underestimated how many industrial movers and how many industrial moving companies started out as house moving and structural moving companies. But yeah, that was how it started. We started with the residential moving in BC, and then we just kind of branched out because so many of the skills transfer so easily. Like you still need all of your engineering. You still need to be aware of your environmental impact. The health and safety has to be there because you're still working with huge cargo. Some of the houses that we moved are larger than a lot of the stuff that our industrial division deals with even.
Right.
Like we've moved 10,000 square feet brick mansions. We've moved fully like glass buildings. Right, so things that are really delicate and heavy and large. So it just kind of makes sense once you've been able to do those things to branch out into other sectors that need those same skills.
Yeah, I hope I hope you have some pictures of some of those residential structures that move because it's always fascinated me. I think I was in Toronto one time, and they were moving a house like through the city. It was just bizarre to see it. It almost seems a little surreal that they can even lift these and then move it. It is amazing. Now, moving more, I want to go more into their service offering. We've covered a little bit already, but I want to kind of paint a clear picture. So, in a nutshell, what is Nickel Brothers offering clients now in a full scope?
In a full scope, so residentially, we have a home recycling program. So basically, if there's a home that's slated for demolition, rather than it being demolished, we go in, we pick it up, we find it a new family, and we move it to their property. So it's a great way to divert that waste from the landfill, and it's also a great affordable housing option. There's a number of affordable housing organizations that we've partnered with to kind of supply them with houses. And we also lift homes, we skate them. So for instance, there was a home last year that got hit by a mudslide and it got knocked off of its foundation. So we were able to jack it, and then they rebuilt the foundation and made it safe again, and we just slid it back onto that foundation. And then, as a raise job, you can create, we have a lot of people in Vancouver raising their homes so that they can create secondary suites.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what we do for the residential division. And then industrially, we really focus on offering turnkey solutions. So we kind of do everything, right? We do barge transport, we do heavy haul, we do heavy lift, we do jack and slide, we do light industrial and welding. So our goal is always kind of to be able to be that full service provider where we can pick up the cargo directly from the manufacturer, transport it for you, and install it, and just kind of handle everything right from start to finish. So you have the same crew all the way through. You know that they are aware of your objectives, of your values, of your safety requirements, of your expectations, and there's really not as much standby time either because we're using the same crew, the same equipment. A lot of our transporters are dual purpose. So we are able to kind of perform different phases of projects as necessary without having to switch between different equipment. And most of our crews are cross-trained. So depending on what's needed, they can kind of fill in those different roles. So it's all very streamlined.
Yeah, that's actually, yeah, I was wondering about that because there must be, like you already said, there's a lot of similarities to the engineering of it, to put it together, to do a heavy lift move, whether it's residential or industrial. Are there some members of your team that work exclusively on one side, or do pretty much all of them cross over depending on the need?
I would say that all of them cross over at least to an extent, but we definitely have team members where that crossover might only be like one or two projects a year. And they're primarily industrial or primarily residential. And I think the reasoning for that is that, so residential is a lot more, it's faster paced. So when you have an industrial move, you generally have a few months' time where you're planning how that project is going to go, right? You're doing all of the cargo sequencing, you're looking at your trades management, you've got all the engineering, and you have time to set all of that up. Whereas with the residential moves, sometimes our turnaround time might be, a couple of weeks. So the pace is different. And
Right.
based on that, the skills are different. Industrial, I think, is a little bit more detail oriented in terms of having to have everything so precise on paper and circulated to anyone else that's working on that project. Whereas residential, it's really just our team having done it so many times that we can put it together more quickly. The engineering is still there, all the same things are there. But it's a different environment to work in, I think.
Yeah, you talk and these different environments. How for the reach of Nickel Brothers? I mean, what are we talking? I mean, do they work in just Canada, U.S., Canada? What's sort of their reach?
So residentially, we primarily work in BC and Washington. Industrially, at this point, we have worked on projects that have touched 18 different countries. So we work
wow.
globally for our industrial division. Our primary operations, like our offices, are in the Lower Mainland in Vancouver, and then we have an office in Vancouver Island, Washington, and Montreal. So we're kind of set up in enough places that we're very well positioned to be able to receive and deliver cargo based on our office locations.
Right. So if you're operating primarily here and you're doing, and we'll get into some of these projects that you've done. I think I see a couple that were maybe abroad. But are you partnering then with other companies if you're lifting something out of Europe and that needs to get here that you'll then transport to a location? Are you partnering up? There are multiple companies that are involved in that, or is Nickel Brothers actually engineering that whole moving system?
It really depends on the project. So we have cases where we're doing a lot of the engineering even abroad, and we're doing a lot of the logistics and the project management. But we do also have a fairly strong network of kind of partners globally. So if we have kind of multiple things happening in a place, it makes sense to send our crew there, we'll do that. But if it's kind of a one-off, we definitely have partners that we can also utilize to kind of accommodate that need. It really depends on what's going to be more cost effective for the client at the end of the day. Yeah.
I want to move into another section here, which is, again, we've sort of touched on it in briefly, but I want to kind of drill down into more specifics. Is in those servicing offerings, distinguishing one service from the other, because obviously you're doing a wide range, but there is you specialize in multiple sectors, and they're a very different approach. So, like heavy lift, we've got heavy lift and installation, heavy transport, heavy barge transport. Can we start with the heavy lift and installation, sort of breaking down what that offering is?
Sure. So we're asset based. So our heavy lift division is kind of anything that requires, crane work, rigging. We have steel erectors, riggers on staff. We do engineered lift plans as necessary. So again, like it's kind of full service, and that will provide the engineering and the sequencing and everything for that. But obviously, it's a little bit more generally specific to things that need to be on a higher floor of a building, or tanks if they need to be kind of installed and erected, because generally they would be lying down on the trailer. So we would do like a top and tail and lift it into place,
Right.
and then weld it. Yeah.
The and then you get into the heavy transport side, and of course when you do a heavy lift installation, that might include a segment of heavy transport because you've got to get the product there. So a lot of times these would
Yeah.
be working together, I would assume, right?
Absolutely. And sometimes we end up with a jack and slide in there as well. Like we actually have quite a few projects where they need to be lifted and then jacked into place because they're going onto, a higher floor of a building. But once it's at that height, there's no room for the crane in the building, right? Because of the roof line.
Right.
So we will, transport it, lift it, and then jack and slide it into the actual install location. So
Right.
yeah.
And then you're also doing heavy barge transport as well.
Yeah, heavy barge is kind of what we've specialized in for a lot of our company history. We've definitely branched out at this point, but I would say earlier on, heavy barge was really what we were known for. We're one of the only residential movers that offers barge transport in the Pacific Northwest.
Okay.
And we've actually performed more roll on, roll off barge deliveries than any other structural mover in the Pacific Northwest at this point in time.
Wow.
So we're
Yeah.
very experienced with kind of tide management and environmental management in those kinds of scenarios.
Right. I saw it. I want to make sure I'm reading this right. Resident touches about 300 buildings a year
Yeah.
on your residential side. That's
Yeah.
crazy. That's a lot of moving. And I want to now, okay, going back into this into the industrial sector, I want to actually highlight a couple of projects. Actually, there was a question I wanted to ask too, because we've had crane companies on before, and there's so much. There's a lot of specialty in what crane is used for what application or what truck. Like there's companies like I think actually fairly close to you, K-Line, which is manufacturing the trailers, and these. How much of the equipment do you bring in separate equipment, or does Nickel Brothers actually have an inventory of equipment to use? Because it would seem like it would almost there's so many different types of equipment. So is it sort of a mix and match?
It is, yeah. We are asset based, so we do have an inventory of equipment, and depending on the need, we kind of move it around to between our locations.
Right.
But there are always things where if it's like kind of a specialized circumstance, it might not be something that we just have on hand. In which case, we would partner with someone to accommodate that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was curious. I was thinking if they do all these, and I saw some of the numbers of 300 homes, 12,000 tons of materials, all the stuff you move just annually. I thought, I mean, you must have some partnerships that you're working with to be able to facilitate those, because there's always going to be something different popping up, right?
For sure. And we also utilize that network depending on where we are. Like say we have two really large projects happening in two very different locations. Mm-hmm. We'll utilize our partners both for equipment and occasionally for manpower. So it's really important to us that we've built those relationships and we know those suppliers very, very well and can kind of trust them to uphold what our standards are.
Right.
Yeah.
So going into some of these projects now, I like to tail off as multiple questions pop into my head. So I'll try to stay on. I'll try to stay on the topic outline. But you picked out 3 projects, and I was glad because you picked them all from 3 different industries. We've got mining, I think we've got manufacturing, and an oil and gas project. So let's start with the West Shore project, which was a mining operation, I believe, and just talk a little bit about what that project involved.
Yeah, so that was the delivery and install of 3 stacker reclaimers. So they were approximately 700 tons. And one thing that was really interesting about that project is one, we had a very short tide window to get everything off of the barge. So we ended up actually using some of the equipment as the counterbalance on the barge to ensure that we could meet those requirements, and also that everything was done in the safest way possible within that tide. And the other thing that was interesting is that the yard stayed operational during that entire process. So we had to move this 700-ton stacker reclaimer over, operational
Amazing.
over operational conveyors, and like in a place where people were still working and everything was still happening at normal capacity. So there was a lot of just kind of safety requirements to take into account, and different, fun little things we had to do engineering wise to make sure that we weren't impacting those operations at all, while still keeping everyone, safe and doing things in a way that was professional and cost efficient. It's good.
You handle a lot of the marketing and communication side for the company. Do they let you get out to the site still every now and then?
Yes, they do. Unfortunately, I think all of the projects that we're talking about today were before my time.
Oh,
So I didn't get to see any of them, which
well,
is why I've got some notes
they
here.
do 300 moves. I'm sure there's more.
Thank you. But no, I quite often go and I'll take photos or videos, and
Yeah,
we had a move the other day that happened during the day, and it went past a school. So we had 300 kids come out to watch this moving down the road. It was kind of cool. It's kind of cool to get to talk
that is
to all of
pretty
them.
cool.
Yeah.
Get a few more kids into the industry, because
Exactly.
there's 2 or 3 kids out there that every day for the rest of their life until they're like 30,
Yeah.
they're going to be thinking about it and wanting to do that. Maybe that's just me. Maybe that's how I was. I don't know. And going into, I just want to make sure where is that one? There's another project that you highlighted called Catalyst. And I think these projects, are they on your website as well if people want to check them out?
I believe all 3 of these ones are, yes.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Catalyst, what was that project about? That was a power generation project. Is that right?
It was, yeah. We delivered a turbine and some other equipment that was necessary to power out that turbine. Again, I'm not the technical person, so I've got things here.
I had like 30
I'm
questions
just gonna
about
read
how
them. Okay.
that turbine operated. I don't.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so
I'm kidding.
we moved 4 turbine generators, a steam duct, and the electrical rooms on the project. So the purpose of the project was so that Catalyst could start transforming their waste steam into energy. So that project actually won an award for energy conservation from the Canadian Industry Program, which basically kind of looks at projects and judges how in line they are with the government's programs to support clean energy and to support kind of greenhouse gas reduction. And it was the winner in 2016. So
Wow.
that was very exciting that we got to be a part of that.
Yeah, definitely. And then moving on to the oil and gas project. That was I'll let you say it because I'm mixing up my notes here.
It's HPD. So that was, we transported a few different cargo modules, but one of them, I think probably the largest one, was a crystallizer vessel. So we transported that from Underhook at the Port of Vancouver to a barge location, and then we moved it by water up the Columbia River to a landing location in Lewiston, Idaho. And then it was rolled off the barge there and transported by road using the high-wide corridor to Grand Prairie, Alberta. And that project originally started, I believe, in either Thailand or China was where those vessels actually originated. So it was a lot of logistics and planning to get that ready to go. And of course, if anybody watching has used the high wide corridor, I think they're aware of how much goes into permitting for that area. So I think it was that project was really a great way to showcase our customs and our permitting department, and a kind of a testament to how skilled they are at being able to get all of our things approved and making sure that we're doing things in a way that, we can actually get them done at the end of the day.
It must be, yeah. And I was thinking about this yesterday when I was prepping for a company like Nickel Brothers. It must be, well, for one, if you were going to start, if I was coming in and I was going to start a heavy move and lift company, you'd have to go up against companies like Nickel Brothers who have done these projects, because every project you do now proves another set of competencies that you have, and it's just a showcase. And within the industry, the industry is probably, for the industrial sector, is small enough that a lot of people probably know quite quickly who is capable of these lift, I would assume, in this industry.
I think that's true. Yeah, I always kind of talk about industrial transport as being like a global industry that still kind of has like a small town feel, because everybody knows each other, and your reputation based on that has a lot of weight, right? Because people talk. So if you're not kind of living up to your clients' expectations, that's going to get around very quickly. So in that way, like, I think it's true that the more experience you can have and the more you can diversify and kind of prove yourself in those different areas, the larger your available kind of pool of clients and projects is.
Yeah, I was, and I wanted to, that kind of dovetails nicely into the next section, which is about leadership and a company. There's two kinds of, there's multiple kinds, but there's two kind of camps that I find a lot of companies will end up in. There's the companies that they've been around a long time, and that they use as a platform to do things differently, to innovate, to approach the industry different. And there's some companies that use it as basically a way to stay exactly the same and not have to adapt. So how do you see, and we'll start with the team side of Nickel Brothers, how have you seen, and working for them and with them, how have you seen them show leadership in, not just in their industry, but as a company that's been around a long time?
As a company, one thing that I think has been very cool for me to learn about and get more experience in is we actually do a lot of government relations work regarding having more effective waste management policies and just kind of more options for ways that companies can cut down on their emissions. And we also do a lot of lobbying for affordable housing as well. So we really believe that, especially as a family business that's been operating in the same locations for so long, that, we're almost like neighbors to our clients, right? Like, we live in the same communities as they do. A lot of them are repeat clients that we've worked with for, 20, 30 years. So it's really important to us that we're not just working with them, but we're also providing something for those communities, trying to make them better, trying to make them more accessible, more environmentally friendly, more sustainable, just kind of both financially and in terms of the environment, and also really promoting just kind of good, almost like good Samaritan-ness, right? Like, we want the places that we're working with to be better because of the example that we're setting, and that's really ingrained in our culture that way.
Do you, I saw a note that, going back to that family, we did touch on it a bit, but going back to being a family-run business, and was it actually, was there a husband and wife running it originally, and did that culture of if I've got that note right, does that change the culture to I mean, it's no secret that heavy industry there has been sort of a good old boys feel to it, and I get the sense at Nickel Brothers that is not the case. Hopefully,
No.
you're not going to say no. That absolutely is the case.
No, you're right. It was so Henry Nickel, Mr. and Mrs. Nickel. They worked very closely together when the business started. So like she used to, make sandwiches for the crew when they had to move overnight, and I think she was very involved in helping with the safety and just kind of the morale and making sure everyone was really taken care of. And she helped with the operations. She was very involved for someone that wasn't technically a part of the business. From maybe in terms of the public, they looking in wouldn't have seen her as the face of the business, but she really was the person that took care of everything. She made sure that everything was going to happen the way we said it was going to happen, and that everyone had the resources they needed to do that. And I think that's really come through kind of, for all of the future generations. We have 5 departments that have female heads, and we have 4 departments of visible minorities where the leadership of those 4 departments are visible minorities. So it's very inclusive, and I find, like, I've worked in construction for a very long time, and I genuinely feel like Nickel Brothers is probably the most empowered that I've felt. The leadership team is very, very approachable. They want to know if something's wrong. They want to know how they could be doing things better. They want to know how their decisions are affecting everyone else. Everyone is equally important, and everyone's feedback is very, very valued. And I think that does come back to it being such a partnership when it started, that, we're all still partners, in that we all rely on each other and have to take care of each other.
It's funny, going back to when you said Mrs. Nickel was, it sounded like she was head of the HR department before there was an HR department. That's
yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's interesting when I hear, companies that they have diversity in their companies, and I think any company who is looking for the best people is going to end up with diversity naturally, because best people are going to come from everywhere. And as soon as a company zeroes in on a certain type of person that they need, I mean, they're eliminating a lot of options. And so it's very consistent that the companies that grow just organically have that. And it becomes part of the culture. And I would assume with Nickel Bros, it is about looking for the right people and the best people, and you end up with a very diverse group.
I think this is going to kind of go back to something that you said at the very beginning, but you mentioned that the industrial sector seems to be one of the only sectors that has families that continue to own and operate the businesses for multiple generations. Mm-hmm. And I think that is kind of linked to finding the right people, in that
yes.
The industrial sector is really one where if you're not passionate about it and if you don't love it, you're not going to last in it for very long. That's just kind of the way it is, because it demands so much of you, both time-wise and learning-wise and problem-solving-wise. Like, you need to be in it and kind of on all of the time, because your team could need something, in the middle of the night. Your team is going to need things on weekends. It's not a Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 type of industry. Mm-hmm. So I think that's probably one of the reasons that the companies that grow have to have the right people, like you said, because one, if you're not the right type of person, you're not going to last anyway, because you're not going to enjoy it, and you're not going to have that drive to make things work and to make them work well that you need, because it is such a detail-oriented industry. I feel like I'm using the same words over and over again,
and
but
very high stakes. Yeah, it's very
high stakes.
The work you're doing is, it's dangerous work. These are big, heavy moves. Like, there's no way around that.
Absolutely, yeah. So I think those things kind of go hand in hand. That's why the people that have been in it stay in it. right? Like we have employees that have worked with us for 30 years and it's because that's their life.
Yeah.
You know?
Do you think that there's a way or that Nickel Brothers sees something before they hire someone? How do you know that they're going to love it, that they're going to last? Do you think that there's a way of knowing that?
I've heard that our president, Jeremy Nickel, is very good at finding that just through gut feeling. He's a very big believer in first impressions. So I should probably ask him what his first impression is of people that seem to have that drive. But he's generally very good at just picking up people within 7 to 10 seconds. Yeah, this person's going to work or this person won't. And he's most always spot on. But I think we've also had a lot of people that have joined the company in kind of less traditional ways. For instance, I was a contractor who ended up working full time. Our CFO was a contractor who ended up coming on full time. Our estimator was an intern who ended up coming on full time. I think a few of our crew members, they started off with us as laborers and, would kind of, and then left to have their wonderful office crews and came back because it just wasn't, as exciting and as fulfilling as what they were doing with the residential and industrial moving. So I think a lot of it is just once people have tried it, they come back or they see it and they know. And I think some of it is just trusting that when people say I'm in this, then they're in it because they know the stakes. And once they've had a couple of weeks to try it out, I find it usually only takes 2 weeks for people to decide if it's what they want or not. So it's usually pretty quick. And if after 2 weeks it's still what they want, you know it's what they want because after it's just so demanding that after 2 weeks you just know.
That's interesting. There's a lot of jobs that actually cannot be that clear because they're more of a step-by-step process job, whereas they're not quite as demanding. So you might actually go a few months before you realize that the person really isn't either into it or very capable of it. And, but in that, I'm sure when you're moving a house, I'm sure you can tell very quick if somebody knows what they're doing. How long were you a contractor before you switched over to actually joining their team?
I was a contractor for almost 6 months. So I just did their social media marketing basically. And then one day I started working with them as a contractor actually because I just saw a house on the side of a highway and I was like, well, that's really cool. That would be a neat thing to promote. So I sent them an email and I met with their business development manager at the time. And he ended up bringing me on to do their social media. And about 6 months in, they had started inviting me to their team building activities and really kind of involving me within the staff pool. So I got to know everyone and I really got to know what they were doing, and it was just such a great place to work. It's one of those environments where no one really just has one job. Everyone does a little bit of everything. But it makes it really collaborative, and that's something that you don't always have when you're self-employed. So for me, it was so refreshing to have people that I could rely on and that I could get feedback from. And so I ended up, again, just sending an email saying, hey, I would really love to be doing more for you. Let me know if there's ever an opportunity for that to happen. And I think about a month later, I came on full time, and it's been awesome. But it's funny because I was originally hired as the marketing manager. And since then, I've started doing hiring and business development. I head the government relations team. I do our PR. I do our public speaking at different events. So it's really not a business, I don't think, where you can go into it focusing on one thing. But if you're someone who wants to learn and kind of expand your skill sets, it's a really great industry to be a part of because there's so many different things that are necessary to make these projects happen and to build those client relationships. So it's been a really interesting year and a half.
I definitely find that that's quite important to have kind of a variety in your job. I find when I speak to a lot of people, I find that those who are doing a specific job and that's kind of all they do every day, kind of becomes maybe not boring, but just kind of like, there's nothing more. They're like, oh, it's the same thing over and over again. So for me, I definitely find that the more, even if it's technically not your job, but the more you get to do, I mean, the more you learn, and then it doesn't matter what position you're put in, because you've built your skills for that, right?
Yeah, and at the very least, if there are some skills that you're lacking, there are other people on your team that you can go to teach you or mentor you, right? Yeah, absolutely.
And I will say, as we wrap up the show, when we ask guests to come on the show, if we talk to an owner or somebody who basically can just make the call, it's usually a very simple process to get people on, or it's a quick no. They don't want to be on like an hour on camera. They're just like, no way. There's no way I'm doing that. But I noticed, and it stood out for me with your team when we originally started the discussion, that there was a willingness to get more information. And I always, as soon as I run into a company where whoever's representing them, in this case, initially it was you, that it says something about the whole ownership group, the whole team, when the person that is on the front line at that particular time is fully engaged. Without even, I've never met the owners of Nickel Brothers. I don't even know what they look like, to be honest. But it says something about who they are, that those are the people that they have that are communicating with companies like ours, and it's sort of a nod to them that they have a team like that in place.
Thank you. Yeah, I think when I was gonna say, it was interesting too for this show because we're covering such a wide variety of things. There were like four of us that could have been appropriate for it, and I think you were involved in those conversations. So we had some discussions trying to figure out like who was the best person to actually take on everything. And I think it kind of came down to me just being the most comfortable on camera. But
that's half the battle.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for coming on, Cassidy, and thank you to Nickel Bros for having you represent their company and the movie industry. Everybody that comes on this show, they do represent a segment of the industry that we're trying to educate people in, and especially in this time, a lot of people now are working from home. And they say social distancing, and social distancing cannot be a huge gap from social isolation. So, we aren't doing anything compared to the people that are on the front lines, but it's our little contribution to be able to keep everybody connected and talking and something to listen to from their actual industry, as opposed to just the news, who is also doing a great job of covering this. But you need a little variety in what you hear.
Yes.
So, I really genuinely appreciate you taking the time and coming on, and especially during the circumstances. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. It's been fun.
Okay, we are going to wrap up the show now. Thank you for watching. There'll be a few words from Gowdy at the end of this show to how you can get involved if you want to be a supporter, a sponsor, and a lot of other ways. Again, thank you to Nickel Bros and Cassidy for coming on the show. We will see you. We've got a ton of episodes coming up. With this remote now, we're booking people all over the place. So please subscribe, stay tuned, and we will see you on the next episode.
Thank you for watching, and please remember to subscribe and follow on Facebook and LinkedIn. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts. Finally, we are excited to launch the Crownsmen Show donation page. If you are a dedicated fan and watch every episode, or you have a favorite industry that you love to follow and would like to help support the production and ongoing shows of the Crownsmen Show, please head over to crownsmen.com/donations. We've set up a couple options, and the first one is the $5 monthly subscription option. And we have the support heavy industry one-time donation. So, and this is all through PayPal, so please head over, take a look. You can read more on the page. Again, it's crownsmen.com/donations. Other than that, thank you so much for your support. If you do subscribe and you make a donation, you might also get a little shout out from me on the next episode. Thank you.